Microsoft Stack. Please share your questions in the chat window, and please don't be shy with the emojis. And with that, I'm going to hand over to our presenter for this morning, Nsiki.
Thank you, Sageshni. Right, so for this Mint webinar Wednesday, we'll be looking at Copilot Studio. So how to create your own M365 Copilots with Copilot Studio. My name is Nsiki Magwaza. I am a modern workplace consultant working with Mint. So this is one of the areas in which we focus on as part of our modern work. As mentioned, if you do have questions along the way, please feel free to leave them in the chat, and we'll make sure that we leave enough time at the end to be able to attend to that. And I think with that, let's get started. So with the introductions out of the way, just to talk briefly through the webinar structure, we'll be looking firstly at Copilot Studio. So what Copilot Studio is, how it relates to some of the other Copilots that Microsoft has produced or put together, basically what it can do for you and what you can create with it. After you've looked at the basics of Copilot, we're going to build a Copilot together, a custom Copilot, and that will be the bulk of this presentation. And then lastly, we'll look at customizing your Copilot, some options that you can use to tailor it to your specific workflows and your specific needs. Then we will lastly look at a live example of a custom Copilot that we've built, leaving a little bit of time at the end for any questions that you have. So just by quick show of hands, let's see. Yeah, so the reactions should be available by quick show of hands. Has anyone here worked with Copilot Studio previously or with Power Virtual Agents? Feel free to raise your hand. We can see how many of us have some experience. I see one hand, 2, 3. Okay, great. So I think this will be quite exciting then. So a lot of this we might have perhaps heard about theoretically or conceptually, but we'll actually get to go through it together here. So before we actually, I think in that case, before we go straight into Copilot Studio, it might make sense for us to just recap what a Copilot is. So a Copilot is Microsoft's intelligent assistant. It helps you with some of your daily tasks. It helps you with a variety of different tasks, such as getting meeting minutes, getting meeting summaries, as well as some creative tasks, such as creating documents, refining and adjusting documents, and also finding information within your workspace, and also a couple of other details, such as being able to collaborate with others. So the Copilots that most people are familiar with are Copilot for M365, which integrates with your existing suite of Microsoft productivity apps, such as Excel, Outlook, Teams, and so on. So Copilot Studio is just one of many Copilots. As mentioned, most people are a little more familiar with either Copilot for M365 or Microsoft Copilot, which you can access via the web at copilot.microsoft.com. I think many of us have had experience or interactions with either using tools like ChatGPT or Copilot. So I think Copilot for the web will be fairly familiar to many of you. However, as you can see from just these 10 examples here, Copilot, it expresses itself in a number of different Microsoft products. So we have Copilots, Microsoft Copilot for your everyday use. We have Copilot for M365, which is focused heavily on productivity. But then we also have some of the more specific Copilots that work in some of the products that Microsoft has put together, such as Microsoft Power Platform. So in this case, it would be using Copilot for low code and for no code. In addition to that, if we look at the next item over, our role-specific Copilots, we also have things like Copilot for Sales, which can assist salespeople with communicating with their customers, making sure they understand, what their different needs are and what their potential concerns are about sort of the entire sales pipeline. Or for some of our colleagues who are working in customer service, using Copilot for customer service. So that's just some of them. Of course, we have Copilot for Dynamics 365, which has business focus, and a number of others here. And you'll see the little ellipsis that I've included at the bottom. That means that, yes, we have just 10 Copilots which are listed here, but there are many more Copilots which are still in the works, such as Copilot for Finance, Copilot for SharePoint, and so on and so forth. So today, we're going to be looking specifically at Copilot Studio, which focuses on intelligent agents. So what is Copilot Studio? And as mentioned, it's just one of the many Copilots. It's one of the products within their suite of Copilots. And what Copilot Studio allows you to do is to create your own Copilots. It works much like creating chatbots. In fact, if you've previously worked with Power within the Power platform, you might be familiar with Power Virtual Agents, which is the sort of precursor or predecessor to Copilot Studio. So besides just allowing you to be able to create your own copilots, you can also customize your copilots using Copilot Studio. So if you look on the left-hand pane there, you'll see there's a little sort of conversational window where you can see there's a flow that's been created by a user. And in the second pane, you can see how that copilot is integrated into Teams. So by being able to customize it, you can empower your team to make sure that they can create the right copilots through a fairly simple guided no-code graphical interface that basically allows you to just drag and drop elements into your copilot or into your chatbot. And I think the benefit of this is that rather than needing to always follow a pro code approach where you might need to rely on data scientists or developers, by using Copilot Studio, you can empower your citizen developers to be able to easily create copilots to help them with their day-to-day activities. Now, it does also integrate with a host of Microsoft 365 services such as Outlook, Teams, SharePoint, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, but also many others to allow you to enhance your day-to-day functionality and also streamline some of your workflows. So with Copilot Studio, there are a few different things you can do. You can, starting off, work with a variety of templates, so pre-built templates that can help you and your team get a Copilot up very quickly. You can also design the conversational flow using a simple drag and drop interface. So instead of having to understand sort of fairly complex formulas and write complicated code, you can very easily drag and drop elements into your topics and into your conversational flow, including actions, to be able to get your Copilot to perform specific tasks and communicate with your users the way that you need. And once you've built that and you're satisfied with how it works, then you can also deploy your Copilot to your M365 environment for your users to be able to interact with, like we saw in that previous chat window. So I think the key focus here is that whether you are a highly technical user and you have very specific workflows that you need to kick off on a day-to-day basis or many times throughout the day, or whether you're a business user, Copilot Studio can help you build or it can operate as a contextual assistant for you. So feeding off the information that you have within your specific information that you've provided to Copilot Studio. And you can use that to be able to boost your productivity, improve your efficiency as well as your satisfaction at work. So I saw a few hands earlier who had said that, or a few of our attendees had said that they were familiar with Copilot Studio, but I'd be curious to hear about if anyone else here has built any Copilots or any Power Virtual Agents. Feel free to also drop a comment there in the chat. Now, moving on here. Of course, we understand that we can create a Copilot for you, but when I'd spoken about having a contextual assistant, that's one kind of question that often people become quite interested in. Okay, well, what differentiates this from existing Copilots or from Copilot for M365, for example? Let's say you have a Copilot for M365 license, but you're wondering, well, how does this fit into that whole scheme? So I think the first thing is to really compare Copilot for M365, again, just one of the Copilots, to custom Copilots that we build with Copilot Studio. So Copilot for M365 is the flagship AI that Microsoft has released, and it has a broad range of capabilities. So this works very well for knowledge workers, for example, people who, consultants or managers, perhaps, marketers, just to name a few. So people who have quite a variety of work and quite a wide scope of work. Perhaps you work across a number of different apps throughout the day, and you need to achieve a number of different tasks. If we juxtapose that to a custom Copilot, that has specialized capabilities. So it's a specialized Copilot which is suited to a targeted or a custom workflow that you might have, and can also integrate with, with products that you have, be those products that you've built yourself or existing products. And it uses a specific knowledge base and specific apps for you to be able to get targeted a targeted approach to your work. So some of the benefits of being able to create a specialized Copilot, for example, you can tailor it and narrow it. So you can focus on a specific role, build it for a specific role, build it for a specific business unit according to what those users do on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, you could build a custom Copilot that works specifically with your human capital team or your people team to be able to handle those human capital specific business processes. Likewise, you could build a specialized Copilot to be able to assist with your IT support. You might find that within IT, you have a huge number of requests for password resets, and the existing process that you have is a fairly simple process in terms of users need to visit a specific page and they need to click on a specific link. But because of the way that the IT team currently works, it means that a user will send off an email to IT. IT will have to wait, or that user will have to wait until IT reads that email, responds to them, sends them the link to reset their password. So this, for example, is one process that could then be shortened and be folded into using a custom Copilot. Some other examples, you could have a customer-facing Copilot. So instead of just having an internal Copilot, you could have a Copilot which helps with answering customer inquiries or inquiries on your website. So, for example, if you have customers who regularly ask, or through your customers, there are a number of questions that are regularly asked, such as, what are your return policies? What time are your stores open? Where are the closest stores to my location? This is an example of questions which you might not necessarily need to have someone answering, but which you can outsource to a custom Copilot. And of course, there's a whole host of other custom Copilots that you could build. That's just a few of the examples. Yeah. So again, internal company policies, you might have a specific, not company policies, internal company workflows. You might have a specific workflow where users have some proprietary software that your company has built that they need to interact with, perhaps through an API. By linking that API or that software through that API to a custom Copilot, it can allow users inside your organization to have an automated process that then leverages that proprietary software that you've built. Okay, so these are just some of the benefits of using Copilots. I think probably the part that all of us are here for, the interesting part is for us to actually build a Copilot together. So for this next section, I'm just going to cut my camera and then I'm going to switch over to the Copilot Studio portal where we can actually sit together and build a Copilot. So let's go over. Right, please just give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen okay. Super, thank you, Sageshni. Okay, so this is the landing portal when you arrive on Copilot Studio, copilotstudio.microsoft.com. This is the portal in which you land. Now, there are a few different options which are immediately available to you. You can create a Copilot. You can view your existing Copilots within the library. You can view which connections are available and which actions are available to your library, and then, of course, access the remainder of the Power Platform. Now, the first and probably most interesting part to me is that just by using a simple prompt, using everyday language, you can describe your Copilot, describe what it needs to do, and Copilot will walk you through a step-by-step wizard that will essentially taking your information, turn it into a Copilot or into a chatbot. So here would just be something along the lines of, I need a help desk that can help, or I need an employee onboarding Copilot that can assist employees, new employees, with finding our policy documents. That's just an example of what you could write here, and it would help you build your Copilot out from here. There are also a number of different templates which you can work from. So I'll just expand this. I'll head over to Create, and you'll see that besides creating a Copilot from scratch or creating actions which could integrate into your other Copilots, you can start with a number of different pre-built templates. So this is anything from a common travel question Copilot to something related to store operations that could be used by frontline workers, all the way over to just a regular weather assistant, which you might use for, especially if you need to travel to client meetings, that could be something that's quite useful for you getting a bit of a heads up of what's happening on the road. So you can see there's a whole variety of different templates that you can use from here. There's a lot of investment that's happening in this area. So you can see there are a few interesting ones that are still coming soon. JobCraft. I'm sure CV Match might be something that a lot of our viewers might be interested in, especially if you work in a people team or human capital, then that might be something that could be useful for comparing candidate CVs to each other. Right, but I think for this specific demo, what we'll do, instead of using one of these pre-built templates, let's just start from scratch with a new Copilot. Okay, so under the details here would be the name of your Copilot. In this case, I'll call it Mint Webinar Copilot. Oh, right, I'd used that a little bit earlier. Let's just add an underscore to be different. You can, of course, add an icon from here. So you would need to select some sort of small PNG file. In this case, I'll just select a Copilot Studio icon and click Save. And then a brief description of what this Copilot would be. So in this case, let's say this is going to be a help desk support for ICT. So I would just say this again is for other users who are accessing this Copilot to be able to see what the Copilot does. So this description is just for users to get a better understanding. So this Copilot assists users in retrieving IT support. IT support documents and achieving basic ICT tasks which they need help with. Okay, hopefully that will be descriptive enough for our users. Now, under these instructions, this is something that's quite different if you have worked with Power Virtual Agents. In this case, you can actually tell Copilot what its primary purpose is. And by using generative AI, it'll try its best to shape a sort of, I don't want to say a personality, but it'll try to make sure that it can meet those requirements of what you've described here as part of those instructions. So I'll give Copilot some input here. You are a help desk support agent who assists employees with finding information, spelled correctly, about company policies and performing other basic functions related to ICT. So this is just a bit of an example to help shape the Copilot in terms of what feedback it would give to the user. Okay, so we've described the basic details of our Copilot. For the language, I'll just leave it as English. Currently, it's using US English. That's fine for now. And then this last area, you would add any knowledge that you need. So if you have a company website where perhaps you have some corporate responsibility and some information about what your company does, what services you provide, so on and so forth, you could plug in your public website here. And this Copilot would then be able to extract information from that website and then feed it back to your users. You can also link to a SharePoint and OneDrive set of data. This is fairly useful for If, for example, you have a set of policies that you've provided in a single OneDrive or a single SharePoint location, and those policies continually get updated and more documents get added to that, this could be a useful information source to add here. Now, you'll see some of these other areas are grayed out. This is just because as a starting point, these are the two that you can start off with. And once I've created this Copilot, then once I've clicked save, then I'll be able to add in some of these others. So for example, if you have analytics data that's fed through Microsoft Fabric, perhaps you have sales data that comes from 150 stores nationwide. That could then be data that's fed in via data pipelines through Microsoft Fabric. Dataverse, of course, if you have structured data. And of course, you can see there's a whole range of other connectors that you can use here. If you need to integrate with Azure SQL, SQL Server database, or if you need to use something like, or another database such as Oracle, or perhaps you have a ticketing system that you leverage or that you use through Jira, information that you have stored in Confluence. I think the point is here is that there's a whole range of other connectors that you can use to connect data to. And of course, if you can't find what you need, you can describe it here using the search bar. For now, I'm not going to add any knowledge sources. I will come back to this in a moment. So I think from here, we can create our webinar Copilot _ here. We've got our description and our instructions of what needs to get done. So from here, Copilot is going to start getting set up. It's going to instantiate in the background, and then we can start adding our knowledge sources and start defining our topics. Just check if there's any comments so far. Yeah, I do see some comments. Some of these are quite long, so I think I'll come back to this in a sec. Okay, right. So we've created our Copilot here. You can see it's popped up on the left-hand side here. It's got the little symbol as well as the description, which is busy loading, and the instructions, which are loading here. So just to collapse this to make things a little bit cleaner for the moment, you'll see, first of all, we have a window that's popped up on the right-hand side here. Test your Copilot. So you'll see there's this little intro. Hello, I'm Mint Webinar Copilot, a virtual assistant, just so you're aware. It gives a little bit of a blurb from here, and you can see that this is an interactive pane which we can communicate with from here. Just to focus on the core parts here, besides our details, we can, of course, add knowledge here. So if you have specific articles, specific documents that you want to be referenced, you could add them here. And you can also allow your Copilot to use general knowledge outside of the specific information that you've provided here. Why that might be important is that you might want to turn this off if, for example, you only want to reference sources which are provided, which you've provided to your Copilot. So whether you work in some sort of advisory services and you need to make sure that you have the most up-to-date information, but that it's also correct, 100% correct, and you're not relying on information from the web, then this might be one reason why you would perhaps turn it off from here. Okay, so we've got our knowledge sources here. We've got a bit of an outline of what the different topics are, which I'll come to in a moment, as well as an actions area. You can see currently there are no actions which have been added to this Copilot, and the Copilot's not published. Okay, so just to go through some of these tabs to give us a bit of orientation, we have our knowledge sources. In this case, we had said that this would be some sort of ICT Copilot, some Copilot that would help with your basic ICT tasks. So you can now see that all of this enterprise data or all of these connectors can be used. If I have tickets which are being managed on Jira, I could click it from here and then connect that with my credentials and then start pulling tickets in from there. Or perhaps if I have a knowledge base that I've put together on Confluence, that could be used here. In this case, I'm just going to upload some files directly. So what I will select as part of our files, I have two documents, an IT policy and a printing policy. These are just fictional documents that we generated ironically using Copilot. And you can see it shows what the name of the document is. You can rename it if need be. And then a bit of a brief description. This knowledge source searches for information contained in the name of the document here. Yeah, so let me add that. I'm just going to switch windows so we can briefly get a bit of a glimpse of what the IT policy document looks like. I think that might be a little bit helpful. There we go. Right, okay, so we can see this was an IT policy which we generated using Copilot just for a fictional company called XYZ Financial Services. Just a bit of an introduction of what the IT and data policy is about, the scope of it, and then we have a few different areas. So we have our IT resource management, we have details about data, how employees should be managing data, making sure that they're using it in a responsible manner. And of course, there's a section on artificial intelligence, then just a few other details about roles and responsibilities. So as you can see, nothing particularly in depth, but I think that should suffice for the purposes of us demonstrating in this this Copilot how that works. Okay. So we've added our knowledge sources, and you can see it's busy in progress. It's busy just binding these knowledge sources to this Copilot. So let's continue and see what else we have here. Now, as I think that, again, right, as part of our topics, you can see we have both custom topics as well as some system topics. So these system topics are topics that by default, well, all of these are by default, but these starting ones, but these system topics are core topics that you need for any of your copilots to operate. Now, what a topic is essentially it's a conversation stream, or it's a collection of information that's arranged logically to explain to the copilot how it should communicate. For example, if we receive this sort of input, then start this conversation and then follow this set of steps. So we'll look at a detailed topic in a moment. And then, of course, the custom topic. So we can see 3 topics that have been created here by default. If it's your first time working with Copilot, then with Copilot Studio, then this always shows up. But these are quite useful for us to get a bit of an idea of how these conversations actually flow. So again, once we finish with this brief orientation here, then we can dive into some of those. Actions, these could be some specific tasks that you need to get executed by a copilot, be it this copilot or another copilot. This could be, for example, if you have some sort of power automate flow that does a specific set of actions where it drafts an email, it sends it, or it kicks off an approval process, whatever that is, you can add that action here. As you can see, there are a number of different connectors that are available here, from custom connectors to built-in connectors. So, for example, it could be getting a forecast. It could be running some specific VBA script within Excel, sending an email notification, so on and so forth. So, of course, you can filter down on these and see what's available to you here. So, calling a SAP function, just as an example. Okay. Just 1 or 2 more points before we get to the juicy stuff. You have your analytics. The first time you create your Copilot, this will take a little bit of time to set up, but this is essentially a Power BI dashboard that provides you with analytics on usage and interaction with your Copilot. So if you need to know if this is a customer-facing Copilot, for example, seeing, well, how much engagement am I actually getting? How many sessions have been held in terms of how many people have communicated with this Copilot, how many people, or what's the abandon rate? So when we get halfway through a conversation and then someone just exits, how often does that happen? So a lot of these analytics can help you with seeing which parts of your Copilot actually work quite well and which parts need additional massaging. And there are a couple of different sort of segments. There's summary, customer satisfaction, sessions, billing, and then boost conversations. So as it's busy still setting up in the background, we'll leave this for now. And yeah, if there are any other questions that anyone wants to particularly pose about this, then at the end, perhaps we can dive into that. And then on the last tab, you'll see here there are a number of different channels. So when we speak about channels, these are places where this Copilot can be surfaced. So you might want to integrate that with Teams so that your coworkers can access your Copilot directly within Microsoft Teams. Or, for example, you might want to set that up with to work within a Facebook page. Let's say you have a Facebook page where there are for a jewelry company or whatever it is. You could then set this up so that users can communicate via Facebook through the little chat option, and then that would sort of feed into this Copilot and that would communicate back. Of course, for things like customer service, that's also quite decent for setting it up via mail. So for now, of course, because this is just on a, so I'm on a trial license with this. It's saying I might need to upgrade the license soon to be able to publish, but yeah, that's more just a matter of how long of a window you have. I think there is a 30-day trial, which you can access on copilot.microsoft.com. So that could be a good place to start. Okay, and then just one more point here. Because of the way that by default, this is set up with authentication, this requires for safety and security that I now need to be logged in under my own accounts. So because I've chosen Teams authentication as the default, that's why it's only showing Teams by default here. Of course, you can go and change the settings if you need this Copilot to be exposed in your own website or via a mobile app or email. Okay, right. So that was quite a bit of information, but I think the best way to really get started with these is to dive into one of the topics to better understand how the inner workings of one of these Copilots operates. So you'll see that there are 3 sample topics that were created here, lesson 1, 2, and 3. So let's just start off with lesson 1. So I'll just collapse this side window for now, so we can focus on this. Now you'll see the crucial components of this are a trigger. So when a user is communicating and they use one of these phrases, something that contains the word store hours, for example, then it kicks off this conversation thread, this topic. So it starts this topic, and then it would follow the subsequent steps from here. Now you can see the first step here is that it posts a message. I'm happy to help with store hours. And then in this case, it's just a hard-coded value. It says the Redmond hours are so on and so forth, and the Seattle hours. And then at the end, it redirects to another conversation. So let's test this out and let's see how this might operate. So starting off with this little test window, this is very useful for if you're building out your conversation topics and you have complex logic and you need to make sure that it's interpreting it correctly. You would use this little test window. So let's just start off. Okay, hello, I'm a Mint webinar Copilot. Let's just respond with hello and see where it goes. Right, okay, so it started off with hello, how can I help you? Now, the interesting part here is that on each of these responses, you can click and see the conversational flow, see where it's navigated to and which topic it started off with. So in this case, it started off with the greeting topic. So that was triggered by this third word here, hello. And then that continues through. That was a very simple flow, but that just stops there. If we now were to ask about store hours, the logic would be that it should redirect to the lesson 1, a simple topic, which details store hours. Just a few small details here. What you can do is under this ellipsis here, you can go track between topics if you need to make sure that you can track an entire conversation as it moves from one topic to another. So in this case, I would ask, what are your store hours? And let's see. Now, as you can see, this pane on the left, it jumped through. It went to the end of conversation, which was the end of that last greeting, and then it redirected. And followed a few different steps of logic. Point being is that when we click on each of these individual ones, we can see, okay, it went to the, sorry, when I asked what are your store hours, it kicked off this trigger, and then it communicated, it followed this chain of events and then gave us the answer. So this is quite useful where we see that as we click on each item, we can follow how it moves between different topics. Just a thumbs up to see if we're still on board with all of this. Yes. Okay. Right, super. Okay, so we can see that this is the basics of how a conversation works. But I think the interesting part about working with Copilot is that what you might find that this differentiates from the previous Power Virtual Agents, where you had to manually define what your trigger was, what your question was, and what all of the different conditions were. When it comes to Copilot Studio, where this has changed, is that when creating a new topic, you still have the option to create from blank, where we would define what the trigger would be and what the subsequent steps would be. You can also create from a description with Copilot. And this is what differentiates it and integrates Copilot into not just the responses that the user would get, but how you can actually create your own Copilot. So let's start off with create from description with Copilot. And here we would be naming the topic. So in this case, I want to create a topic. Of course, we're making some sort of ICT help desk assistant. So in this case, I wanted to handle some of the basic or common IT issues that users might encounter here. So let's just call this managing basic ICT requests. Okay, so again, the name of the topic, just so that we can identify it within our lists of topics. And then in the description here, you want to tell Copilot, you want to give it a prompt as to what the purpose of this entire conversation thread is and what it should do here. So if I'm thinking of basic ICT requests, we want users to, let's say, let the user ask for assistance on a variety of common IT issues and draft an email with the request details. Okay, so this gives Copilot a bit of an idea of what the purpose of this topic is and what the logic might be. So let's create and see what Copilot is able to come up with. Now I'm just going to collapse this build window again so we can see a little bit more easily here. Now, as you can see, instead of me having to manually define each of the different phrases, Copilot, by using natural language as well as large language models, it's able to get a bit of an idea of when I say common IT issues, what are the common questions or what are the usual questions that people pose? So you'll see some of these phrases are ICT assistance, report technical issues, network connectivity problems. And of course, because this is generative AI, each time you create this, it might not have exactly the same triggers. So I think the idea is to make sure that you're satisfied with what the starting position is of this entire thread, and then use Copilot to further update the triggers, further update the questions, and further update the responses from there. So if we look at the entire flow, we have a few triggers, a few different phrases. From there, Copilot asks a question, and it looks in the user's response, so whatever text that we provide in this text box here, and then it saves that response, asks you about a few more details, saves those details in another variable, and then puts together, provides a message at the end saying, thank you for providing the details. We'll draft an email with the following request, and then takes those details that you've that you've input as a user, and then puts them together in a message. So let's save this topic just as is, and let's give it a test to see how it works. Okay, so we've saved, and super, topic is saved, and let's experiment from here. So I'm going to restart to have a new conversation. Okay, hello, I'm Mint Webinar Copilot. Hello. Now from here, you see it's kicked off the greeting phrase, and I need help with ICT. Yeah, let's just see if it can identify that. Now, as you can see, although help with ICT was not directly one of these phrases, Copilot was still intelligent enough to be able to locate this this topic, managing basic ICT requests, and will then navigate me through the remainder of the conversation. Now we can see it's at this next point, what IT issue do you need assistance with? Yeah, my network is slow. So it will save that information within that IT issue and then asks for more details. When I navigate to copilot.microsoft.com, it takes a long time. Let's just say that's the user's response. Okay, now as you can see, it's ended this conversation and followed that entire flow. And I've got this message back to the user. Thank you for providing the details. Here's your IT issue. When I navigate to that, it takes a long time. Cool, those were the details that I provided. Please review the email before sending it. Now, so in this case, I see it hasn't gone and attached the action to be able to send an email to anyone. Of course, that might be because I didn't provide quite enough information. But as a starting point, this is a good place to be able to have the scaffolding of how you might want to shape your topic. So in this case, let's say I don't necessarily want the user's entire response, so just free text to be saved, but I want to curate a specific selection of what the user should be able to choose from here. So in this case, I'm going to click Copilot, and using Copilot, I'm able to edit the topic within Copilot. I know it sounds a little bit like marking your own homework, but point being is that I've selected this node. You can see it has one node selected there. So perhaps instead of having this entire string, I'm going to ask something along the lines of change the question to identify multiple choice. So instead of identifying user's entire response, you can see there's a multiple choice options, which is available there. That's what I want to use with the following options. Now, the options in this case, let's say I want password reset. I want out of office, and I want to allow users to search a knowledge base. So let's say those are the 3 items that I want them to be able to choose from. When I click update, instead of me having to manually change each of these items, select multiple choice options and define what each of these options should be and make sure that it's saved as the correct type, by using this edit with Copilot, it can update that automatically for me. Now you'll see that it hasn't changed any remaining parts of the topic. It's only changed that selected node that I'd asked it to change by selecting and then giving that input. Excuse me. Okay, so this is a good start. Let's say from here. Okay, so I think my aim in this case, let's say let's focus down just for demonstration purposes on the out of office. And we want to create a short flow where a user talks to the Copilot. They say, okay, I want to mark myself as out of office. And let's say your internal company process is that the first thing that you need to do is mark the dates that you're going to be out of office for and then send an email to your manager. So let's imagine that that's the scenario here. So in this case, I would say, so I want to make sure that the correct option gets triggered. So if the user selects password reset, it isn't going to now send an out of office email to my manager. So I could manually go and add the logic here by saying add condition and define the condition. But instead, I'm going to say add a condition below. Let's try it in English. Add a condition below this question with the matching value for each question option. So instead of me having to create a condition and say, if the user response is equal to password reset, then do this, so on and so forth, I can just ask it to add a matching condition for each question option, and yeah, it should be able to expand from here. Sorry. Add a condition below this question with a matching value for each question option. Okay, just have to double check my work there. Now, this is one of the areas where it requires a little bit of sort of work from the user side. Now you'll see that the condition hasn't been added directly below this question. So I think this is a feature that probably will show up in future where you're able to add it in the exact location. But from a manual from a manual perspective, there are still some steps you have to do in terms of, for example, having to move things around. So we can see that those conditions were added. We have our password reset, out of office, and search knowledge base. That's been added at the very bottom here. So in this case, I'm just going to cut these two options since I wanted to move directly from that question into those conditions. And I'm going to, by selecting the little plus node here at the bottom, I'm going to paste those nodes that I just pasted just so that they're out of the way. Actually, sorry, this doesn't make sense. Maybe we can, apologies, maybe we can rather place this inside the search knowledge base. Again, if need be, if you want to just delete any of the existing options, you can do so. But I digress. Moving back to to out of office, we wanted to make sure we captured the user's start date and end date for their leave, and then send an email off here. So from here, we can add a question here. So add a question below, asking the user for a start date for their out of office. Right, so we can see that's it asks for the start date for out of office. So I'm just going to add a couple of things and then move them as required, and then say add a message. Oh, sorry, question asking the user for an end date for their out of office. So as we can see, you are able to very quickly add in questions which can identify the right type of information, store them in the right variables, and then from there, you can, of course, move them around, put them in the right place that you need within your conversation flow. And then at the end, perhaps we would add in an action. This one I'll do manually for now, just to demonstrate what the action looks like, where you say call an action. In this case, I want to create an email. And by looking through each of these appropriate connectors that are available, I could create an email that would be sent off. I think the specific connector I'm looking for is send an email. There we go, send an email version 2. So just one last step that we need to do here before we can finish off this part of the demonstration. You'll notice that by adding this connector, there are some permissions which need to then be permitted here. In this case, I've signed in, I've got my valid connection. You can see it's using my email address there. It will add the connector. For the purposes of this, I'll just input my own email address, so the toString and nsiki.magwaza@mintzgroup.net. The subject, out of office, and then for the body, hi, I'll be out of office. Now, there is additional steps that you could do. For example, if you wanted to define this, there's a whole host of functions that are provided to you. If, for example, you want to reference variables inside, you could say, hi, I'll be out of office, so that this text is stored, and then you could reference, I'll be out of office from, and then you could reference using an and then reference the specific topic dot. Again, we had our start date and our end date, which we saved. And then in this case, I'll just select the start date. But I think it demonstrates that you can say, hi, I'll be out of office, and then it will include the start date that you would need from there. Okay, so I'll just delete this last point. That was the welcome. But by doing so, we have essentially created a full topic that allows the user to be able to ask a question or greet the co-pilots, ask a specific question, and then enter a start and end date. But of course, we need to make sure that we test our topic. So let's just give one brief run through before we finish off the section. Hello. What can I help you with today? I need some ICT help, please. Now we can see the options that are available now: password reset, out of office, and search knowledge base. I'll say out of office. What's your start date for your out of office? I'll say 18 July 2024. What's your end date? I'm going to go on a super long vacation, so 18 September 2024. Wonderful. Now, it's reached this point. We need to make sure that we've connected this specific action, make sure that we've provided it with appropriate permissions. You'll see here, it gives a little pop-up window, create or pick your connection. In this case, it does the authentication in the background. So I've clicked my submit. And now this action can be taken or it can be utilized within Copilot. I'll click retry. Sorry, I'd missed a point at the end there. Having an output on the specific connector. But I think the point carries through. I think this does demonstrate how you can sort of step through the entire flow. And at this point, it would send off the email to the details that you've provided from here. Okay, right. That was quite a bit of info, but I think for now, what we can perhaps do is, I think that demonstrates at least briefly how you can put together a Copilot. And then from here, I think we can move on from the demonstration and look at the customization. I just want to make sure, being cognizant of time, that we at least have enough time to be able to get through the last details. Apologies. Let's make sure we're on the correct slide as well. Okay. Thank you for your patience while we sorted out the technical issues. Right, so we've looked at how you can build a basic Copilot, but of course you can customize your Copilot. There are a few different things you can do. You can personalize your Copilot. So Copilot Studio allows you the flexibility to be able to create and build Copilots that can meet your specific needs. And in terms of the customization, you can change the voice. We had just looked at a text Copilot, but of course you can allow the responses to be used through sort of, it can have voice features that can then respond to your users or interpret voice as an input or spoken word as an input from there. So this is some of the ways which you can personalize your Copilot to make sure that it matches the tone and the appearance that you're looking for within your Copilot. In terms of plugins and connectors, we had shown just create an email connector, or the Outlook connector, but there are a whole host of plugins and connectors. Whether you use SAP, Salesforce, there's a whole host of different third-party systems which you can integrate with. And if you have your own custom API, of course, you can build your own custom connector, which you could then use to communicate pulling data or pushing data, whether that's from a data source or whether it's writing to a database, for example. You could use that for those. And of course, above and beyond just being able to create simple chatbots, you can also leverage AI. So by being able to use generative AI, in this case, let's say those topics are there are topics which I've not defined specific knowledge bases for. You can still get this Copilot to be able to use information from the web to be able to answer questions. If, for example, you have a question about leveraging, also about the best way to be able to create a Power App, you could add in this generative AI capabilities by selecting this little generative toggle box within the settings, and then your Copilot would then be able to speak to users and pull information from the web to give them a wider, a better experience in that sense. Okay, right. We're nearing the end of the time, so I just wanted to, again, this was a fairly brief demonstration of what a Copilot is, but I think just in the last few minutes, what I'd like to do is just show what a Copilot, which is slightly more expanded, might actually look like when you have built out a full conversation and you want to see, well, how might I actually handle an ICT request, for example. So let me just switch screens one last time. Sorry, one moment, just waiting for it to load. Okay, so this is just a brief demonstration, or so this is sort of just a brief outline of what the logic might look like for a more extended Copilot, where in this case, for ICT help, we've looked at a number of different options from password resets, data issues, getting a status on an existing issue. And I think the password resets and the access, I think, are not much different to what we've previously shown you. For example, being able to get the user's response, ask them, so get the user's response, ask them what specific system they're asking for access to, and then from there, kick off a number of different conversation flows. In this case, let's say we needed to get a password reset for another system that would then lead to a number of different questions. However, the part I want to focus on here, which I think is the most interesting, is if we look at a status update. So let's say a user, getting a little lost here. So let's say a user wants to get a status on an existing issue. If that was their response, then from here, what we could do is get the user to input their issue number here. And by doing so, we could then kick off Power Apps flow, or you could integrate directly with Jira to be able to extract the information such as the issue status, the description, the summary, so on and so forth, and feed it back to the user. In this case, we had a Power Apps flow, a Power Automate flow. That might be because you want to kick off other mechanisms, or there's additional manipulation you need to do with the flow itself. That you could then include within that flow as opposed to including it directly within the Power App. So this is quite, as you can see, this is fairly extensive, and this is just on a single conversation that we had added. But I think if we look at how the flow that we had taken, and then we look at this as an example of how you might utilize it, where users can look at passwords, they can get status updates, you can kick off flows related to them writing to tickets or getting tickets updated. I think you can see the power of being able to use something like a service bot for users to be able to assist them with ICT help and with other tasks that you might previously have had to leverage personnel for. Okay, so I think that brings us pretty much to the end of the demonstration. I think from here, perhaps we could move to some questions. I'm sure there are many questions that we have at this point. Sugeshni, are there any questions that came up that looked interesting that you'd like to pose?
Yes, there were a few questions, Nsiki. So the first one, Joseph asks, can I create a customized Copilot that can read through documents and provide results based on what the user is asking? For example, can the user ask, what are my benefits as an employee, and results show these benefits and document reference?
Absolutely, thank you. That's a good question. So how that would work is you would add those documents to your knowledge source, and then particularly if you have them in a SharePoint or a OneDrive, then you could add those as knowledge sources. And by enabling generative AI, Copilot would then be able to read through those documents. And if you ask questions about, okay, what is our artificial intelligence policy about, users would then be able to get information from that, and it would give references to that specific document.
Okay, cool. And then JJ asked, can you connect Copilot to a Fabric Spark session to say, send emails based on the Spark session outputs?
Sure. I'll be honest, I'm not entirely familiar with Fabric in terms of the integration capabilities, but I do see that there are connectors to Fabric. So the logic would tell me that if you can integrate with Fabric and with other Microsoft products, unless that's still in preview or hasn't been released yet, then you should be able to, the same way you could use the existing connectors for other apps like Power Apps, you should be able to access the same capabilities.
Okay, great. And then Veronique asked, and this was during the demonstration, can it not be shared to published to SharePoint? I'm not particularly sure exactly which point she was referring, to, though.
So that might, I'm not sure if that refers specifically to being able to embed it within SharePoint. I know you can embed within custom websites. I haven't tested embedding a Copilot within SharePoint, but what I will say is that I do know there is a Copilot for SharePoint that is currently in the works. So that might still be being rolled out as well.
Yeah, and then Carol asked about initiating an API in a conversation, but Andrew did confirm that that is definitely possible.
Okay.
And
Super. Thank you, Andrew.
That's where we are. Yeah.
Just if I can switch over to this window just to demonstrate very briefly. So with this, with this knowledge source that I've added, I'd added in an IT policy and a printing policy here. And when I ask a question, can I use, sorry, I realized I actually forgot to demonstrate this, but can I use artificial intelligence for work? You can see that it's made a reference. In this case, because it's a file that I've provided, the citation just pulls information directly from the file. So in this case, perhaps not the most legible or most readable. But I think if you have these files within SharePoint, then this reference, instead of it just showing a single citation of the information, then you'd be able to, or that would point it to the SharePoint or OneDrive link that you have, so you could access the document. I think that was the first question in terms of asking about SharePoint integration.
Yep, and Labina's confirmed as well. Thank you, guys.
Super, thank you, Labina. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end, unless there are any other questions.
No, that's it.
Okay, super. So Sugeshni, I believe we have another webinar coming up. So if I'll just switch back again to the presentation.
Yeah,
I think if you can.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much, Nsiki, for this informative session. Yeah, just while we have everyone here, if you just go on to that slide with the next webinar, Nsiki. Yeah, so Gmail and Yahoo's recent updates have made changes to how they handle emails. Could be impacting your business. Our next webinar, co-presented by Mint Group and SendMark, a partner of ours, will break down the new email authentication standards affecting businesses of all sizes. So in the session, you'll be able to learn how these updates impact your emails, and then you'll get actionable strategies to ensure they reach inboxes and not spam. And we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you for spending the hour with us. Thanks all.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.